Dear one, I am coming to you to be a blessing unto you. Remember that the Bible said that in the beginning was the Word, not words. So a word can change your life. And so I'm just coming your way to just bless with nugget of wisdom in the next couple of minutes. I'd like you to just pay attention to this text carefully. This is about a young man by name Jephthah, recorded in the account of the book of Judges, the chapter number 11. Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. Note that it starts to talk about Jephthah's accomplishments before it gives us a background of who he was. So Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also bore him sons. When they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. You are not going to get any inheritance in our father or in our family, they said. Why? Because you are the son of another woman. So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a gang of scoundrels gathered around him and followed him. That's quite interesting because the text begins from the positive side of the young man. It says, Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. It did not start from his background. Then it told us about his background. Now listen to the background. It says that the mother was a prostitute. And it's a reason for which the siblings were not going to share anything with him. So they drove him away. Backgrounds can be very powerful. And sometimes many of us are not very confident about who we are because of our backgrounds. We are quiet. We withdraw from others. We don't want to associate. We don't want to open up and invite others into certain spaces in our lives because those areas carry something we don't want others to know. So backgrounds are powerful. And sometimes we feel that if you have a perfect background, then you have a perfect future. Now that's not true. At least this text tells us that the recorder began recording about Jephthah's mighty deeds, not from his background, but rather what he has begun doing. So your background should not necessarily contribute to where you are heading towards. Now that is not to say that you don't need to have a very good and better background to grow. But that is to let you know that if you went through a challenge in life, it should not exercise regulatory influence over you. It should not have regulatory influence over you. You can break that. And so Jephthah had a checkered background, but he never had a crooked ending. So your background cannot and should not influence where you are heading towards. I'd like you to just pay attention to one of my reflections that I penned down just to add something to what I just said. Listen carefully to that. Perfect backgrounds are not God's benchmarks. Man can disdain what God has ordained, but an appointment from God can catapult an obscure destiny into obvious prominence. Maybe you missed that. I'd like to read again. Perfect backgrounds are not God's benchmarks. Man can disdain what God has ordained, but an appointment from God can catapult an obscure destiny into an obvious prominence. And so I speak to your soul and your spirit. I speak to your emotions. I speak to your self-esteem. I speak to how you feel. And I'm talking to you and telling you that if you have had a checkered and a crooked background, this can never affect the future that is set for you. It can be a checkered background. It can be a crooked background. But the future can be different. Again, I'd like to also warn you that if you have had a perfect background, never ever think that the future is for you. There is always something from the realms of the spirit that can determine what happens to a man. But beyond what can happen to a man is what you yourself you do to yourself. So you can be born in a very powerful family. Your friends, your father, your mother, your siblings are just wonderful. They have exposed you to great things in life. And yet your choices create a problem. So you can be coming from a successful background. Your father conquered all the demons in life. Your mother broke all the challenges she was confronted with. And yet, your future isn't good because you have a bad attitude. In the story of Jephthah, make time and read, you will see that the young man had a checkered background, but he had a powerful attitude. He was sent away and he obeyed and left. The Bible says vagabonds gathered around him and he did battle with them as their leader. In a matter of time, he perfected the act of leadership, soldiery, and warfare. Then the Lord opened opportunity. Good friend, don't bemoan your background. And don't also think that your background is all that you need to make it in life. The equation or that which will change what is happening to you, your background and your future, is your attitude. That is the middle element. And I encourage you by this talk that if you have a background that is actually bothering you and you are wondering what you can do to add value to yourself, remember this. Perfect backgrounds that you think can change things are not God's benchmarks. Man can disdain what God has ordained, but an appointment from God can catapult an obscure destiny into an obvious prominence. I'll come your way again some other time. Reflect, feed on this, and be blessed. Shalom. Bye-bye.